Nobel Peace Prize winner Malala Yousafzai has called on Muslim leaders to take a stronger stance against gender apartheid and advocate for the criminalization of such practices under international law. Speaking at a summit on girls' education in Pakistan, Yousafzai urged Muslim scholars and political figures to speak out against the Taliban's oppressive treatment of women and girls in Afghanistan. The Taliban's policies, including the barring of teenage girls from school and women from universities, have sparked international condemnation. Despite ongoing diplomatic discussions, no foreign government has officially recognised the Taliban since their return to power in 2021, with recognition contingent on improvements in women's rights. Yousafzai, who survived an assassination attempt by the Pakistani Taliban for advocating for girls' education, emphasised that voices of Muslim leaders are crucial in challenging the Taliban's actions. She also called for gender apartheid to be classified as a crime against humanity under the international law.
They want to eliminate women and girls from every aspect of public life and erase them from society. They have created a system of gender apartheid. The Taliban have issued more than 100 laws to strip away women's rights, including their right to education, employment, healthcare, and every basic freedom you can think of. They want to eliminate. The Taliban are punishing women and girls who dare to break their obscure laws by beating them up, detaining them, and harming them. Simply put, the Taliban do not see women as human beings.
For further discussion on this, we have joining us Ambassador Suresh Goel, former diplomat, and Professor A.K. Pasha, international affairs expert. So, what I wanted to ask you, Ambassador Goel, is how can religious leaders influence governments to support women's education? Obviously, in Afghanistan, women are banned from education until after the 6th grade. Prior to the 6th grade. What do you believe about this?
One thing about countries like Afghanistan and Pakistan is that the Muslim clergy does have a lot of influence over the government in Afghanistan, clearly because Taliban is a religiously motivated group, ideologically motivated group, and what they are doing is what they believe is the Sharia law proclaims about the women's right, etc., etc. It's not a question of being right or wrong. They are doing something which is ideologically motivated. And therefore, the Muslim Islamic clergy, if Taliban can get to do what the Islamic clergy says, and provided the Islamic clergy does say this, on which I have doubts, they're seriously divided on these issues of women's rights. But if that happens, I don't know. Maybe Taliban will listen, but I have my doubts on this. Similarly, in the case of Pakistan, even though politically, constitutionally is different, but it's an Islamic country, and therefore a word coming from the Islamic scholars would enable Pakistan to try and persuade the Taliban government and talk to them about this thing. The question is, there have been a lot of confrontations between Taliban and Pakistan. I think it was your channel where 2 or 3 days ago we were talking about the Pakistani airstrikes in Afghanistan and the way Taliban has questioned Pakistan's durable line between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Therefore, the idea is that it is all right for Malala to say what the Islamic clergy should be doing, but whether they will do it or not, number one, and number two, even if they do it, whether in Pakistan or in Afghanistan or in India, if they do it, whether Taliban will actually be persuaded by those arguments. I have my grave doubts because Taliban is a very different kind of organization. To give an example, even though we have a different kind of relationship with them, or for the human development. And they know what our record on this or what our views on those rights are. But they are not persuaded by those. Therefore, we need to talk of Taliban on two different fronts. Women's rights are very, very important. One has to keep on talking to them rather, and if the Islamic clergy can persuade them, it will be very good. I look forward to that day.
Obviously, there are many countries that are, have Muslim laws, but what specific actions should the international community take to pressure the Taliban to change their policies?
Is the question addressed to me?
Sorry, A.K. Pasha, Professor A.K. Pasha.
You see, yes, you see the Taliban were successful, as you know, in expelling the United States. The US is still licking its wounds from its disastrous performance in Afghanistan. And since then, the Taliban have been sanctioned. But gradually, step by step, in a very smart move, the Taliban have been coming out of the woods and, you know, whether it is China or Russia or India or neighboring countries, they are beginning to talk to the Taliban, and they are planning to resume some contacts or the other. So this is disturbing for the United States and the West, which had done everything to crush the Taliban for more than 20 years unsuccessfully. So in that way, they are using icons like Malala, just as they used Lech Walesa from Poland against the Soviet Union, or Alexander Solzhenitsyn, or now they are using Muhammad Yunus in Bangladesh to strain the relations between India and Bangladesh. So this is an attempt by the West to shore up support and discredit the Taliban further, that they are an outlaw and you know, they are repressing the women, so on and so forth. But there is very little the international community can do to the hardcore Taliban, who have control over the territory, and they are enforcing the Sharia no matter what so-called Islamic countries say, or even the OIC say, because they know that all these are toothless bodies. They cannot influence their decision-making process. So in that way, the international community has very little leverage, except to accept the reality that they are extremists in implementing the Sharia. So in the neighboring Pakistan also, you have Zia ul Haq implementing the Nizam-e-Mustafa, and you know, in practice, in the northwest frontier and the western part, Pakhtun-held areas, so there is virtually, it is sort of de facto Islamic rule there. The Pathans in the tribal areas, or even in parts of Balochistan and Punjab also, they virtually run the show there, and the so-called secular leaders have very little sway on that. So in that way, the Islamization process, which started from Iran in 1979, you know, it has been spreading its tentacles in the extreme form we saw in Afghanistan, then in Pakistan, and also the Al-Qaeda and Ikhwan al-Muslimin. So this is sort of a regional phenomenon sweeping the Islamic world. And there is contradiction between what the so-called Islamic regimes are practicing and how they are collaborating with others, undermining the Islamic faith of the people who follow, majority of whom are Muslims in this region.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us on that discussion.